Hi everyone, welcome to Inspirational Dentistry with Dr. Mudasser. We've got a fantastic guest today. She's a speaker, she's a consultant, she's a coach, and we were having a really interesting discussion before we went live on air, and we thought we might as well, before we get into it, we might as well go live and talk to you guys and share our knowledge and expertise on coaching. So without further ado, welcome Debra Nash.
Thank you. Thank you. And once again, my condolences to your country for your great loss.
We were just talking about obviously the Queen and the Queen's funeral. Yes. Was today, and it's a somber moment for us all, and it's the end of an era. And I think we're all touched by the Queen and her presence and the differences she made to the world and the impact. And it's amazing because I think there was talk of, I think maybe 4 billion people actually watching the state funeral, which is amazing. So I don't know if there's anyone else in the world that gets that kind of attention, really.
Well, the pomp and circumstance was significant and it was beautiful, but there was still so many touching moments. The bagpipes and the pony and the dogs, and I mean, it was just to show her personality and her love for her country. I love that she, when she was 21 years old, she made a commitment to dedicate herself to serving her country and her people. And I think she proved that out to her dying day.
Yeah, and I think she served us well as a country, as a nation. Absolutely amazing impact. And every Christmas, it's something we all look forward to, the Queen's speech on Christmas Day that she does, and we all tune in at 3 p.m. every day, every Christmas Day. And it's going to be a bit sad, obviously, this year when obviously it's going to be Charles and taking over. But yeah, it's a really touching time. So yeah, tell us about your background then, Deborah.
Well, I did not intend to be in dentistry. So my background is in education. So I have a master's in education and literature and in theater arts. And I was living in the Pacific Northwest in the Washington State, Oregon part of the United States on the West Coast. And all the bond issues fail. And in the United States, when our taxes don't pay for liberal arts school teachers, liberal arts school teachers get fired. So they don't think learning the violin and learning Shakespeare and is as important as learning sports and math. And so my dentist said, you would be great in a dental office. And I questioned him. I said, isn't dentistry a science? I don't do science. My science in college was biology. I took biology, but geology. I studied rocks and earthquakes and formations for my science. And he said, and he was brilliant. He said, dentistry is a science, but what comes before the science are the people skills of dentistry, and you have them innately. I can teach you dentistry, but you've already got what it takes, and that's the people skills and the communication skills and the creativity and enthusiasm. And so he trained me. He was an instructor at the dental school, and he trained me first to be a dental assistant and then matriculated me to his front desk. From there, I was recruited by a 4-man dental group, and I managed their practice. One of them stemmed off and started his own private practice and took me with him. And he told me at the time, this is sort of like when we set the tone. We can even talk about how we do this with our patients, when we can help our patients envision a better future for their dental health. He said, someday you're going to outgrow me. And I will miss the day when that happens. And sure enough, I was recruited by a major consulting organization to become a consultant for them. And
is that a dental consultant?
Dental consulting company. In fact, Dr. James Pride was my employer at the time. So it was at the time called Pride Institute, then it turned out to be Pride Management. So I was one of their consultants for years until I started my own consulting company in 1985. So I have been.
So tell us the difference between a consultant and a coach.
Oh,
for the viewers.
I think a coach does a little bit of deeper dive into the philosophy of care, into the why you do what you do, and how that manifests your operations. I think a consultant focuses more on the operations and the systems of the business, where the coach gets into the, let's talk about where the systems stem from your philosophy and the culture that you create. And I think a coach helps you create the why. I was going to ask you before we started, what was your favorite management book that you've read? One of mine,
Simon Sinek.
I was going to say, starting with why is probably one of the best practice management culture books for a dentist to read, because that, I believe that is the coach helps an office, helps the doctor get that question answered. And I always do what I call with my doctors a professional inventory. I mean, tell me what you want to do, not tell me how much money you want to make, because the money will come. And you and I talked about that. Money's never the solution. It's never the answer. And it's never why. We should never diagnose to pay a bill. That's why I always say you never diagnose to pay a bill. So let's find out why you
I think it's an important thing that I think people fail to understand, especially as dentists. We spend a lot of time focusing on the clinical aspect and doing the treatments, but we don't actually realize on the business side of things. And I think that's where a business consultant and a coach really sort of can be a catalyst for growth for a practice, for a practitioner, both personally as well as professionally, as well as from a business point of view, and sort of have a sort of specific clear goal to where you want to go with your business. And I think that's the key with getting a consultant or a coach to help you do that bit, because that's something that they don't teach you at dental school.
I will tell you that sometimes I'm hired to be a consultant and I end up being a coach.
Which one do you enjoy the most?
Because
which one do you enjoy the most?
I love them both, but I will say I love it when I can see the light come on in a practitioner's eyes, when I can help them fall in love with their craft again, when it's not about what will and will not be paid. Or in the United States, of course, insurance is a major factor in dental offices, and it's not handled necessarily very well in our country. So for some of clinicians in the United States, it's an obstacle. It's a barrier to treatment, not a gateway to treatment. So helping them see that shouldn't be a factor, and helping them get the mindset of wanting to do the right thing. I was going to mention that when I consult and coach, I always ask myself two questions, and I always teach my dental offices, if you can answer both of these questions with yes, you know that you're going in the right direction. And it can be for coaching or consulting. So the two questions, number one, is what you're doing good for the patient? That has to be number one. Am I diagnosing in the best interest of the patient? And do I have the right people on my team that's in the best interest of the patient? Are my scheduling systems in the best interest of the patient? Is my financial system in the best interest? So I have to be able to answer yes to the first question. Is this good for the patient? The second question to ask is this good for the practice? Because it has to be good for both the patient and the practice. We certainly want it to be patient-centric, but if we're not running a good business, then our patient care will suffer. It will eventually suffer. So the whole idea about good business systems and good business teams is that we want to provide the best care that we possibly can for our patients. In order to do that, we have to have systems that substantiate what it is that we do. We have to have great team members who know how to communicate effectively. We have to have great skills. I always say that when people talk about fees, dental fees, I always say there's three ways you measure your fees. And when you're even describing to your patients, what are your fees based on? I always say your fees are based on three things. The first is the skill required to do it right. That's the first measurement. The second is the time it takes to do it well. And the third is what materials, what laboratories, what environment do we create that are going to give us the best results? So I said, you know, that's, for me, that's how we determine our fees. So I think
it's a really, really powerful you know, way of looking at a dental practice and looking at the ins and outs, and for you as a practitioner to understand how your business actually works and operates. So the subject obviously matter that we've decided for this was patient communication. And I think it's something that's really, really, obviously we're going to dive into and look into, that obviously the importance of patient communication. I think as dentists as well, we spend a lot of time focusing on the treatments and the treatment options, but we forget our own patient base. And the key to business as well as, you know, successful dental practice is relationships, and the relationships you have with your patients, the relationships you have with your colleagues, your co-workers, and people who are around you, and how do you maximize the potential in that business? How do you get the best out of people? And I think that's the question that people probably never really ask themselves, because they're too busy focusing on thinking that I can make, you know, keep going with the treatments and trying to make money, rather than focusing on other ways to get there in a you know, in a more sustained way.
Well, I think two things that are really important to know. First of all, 80% of the reason why a patient chooses their treatment is based on the relationships that they establish with that practice. I think that's pretty critical to understand that. I don't understand the tertiary anatomy of your crowns. I don't know that you use the best instrumentation or the best laboratories, unless someone tells me, which is, once again, communications. But the other important thing component to think about is, if you really think about the time a patient spends in your practice, 85% of the time you spend with a patient is in communication. 15% is spent in clinical application. And we spend most of our time, especially in dental school and even in continuing education, learning the clinical application of what we do. And we spend very little time in learning the communication aspect in what we do. And that incorporates a lot of things.
One of the powerful things is non-verbal communication is actually far more effective than actually the words. Yeah, than actually the words that you're speaking, your body language, the way
55% body language, 55%, 38% tone of voice.
Exactly.
7% of the words we use.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
sometimes when I go in and I coach a doctor, if I'm in office and I'm watching them, and I'll say, I want you to move your body. I'll say, I want you to move your body. You're in the wrong position to have a conversation. So you shouldn't be having a conversation. I always say, look at the people, not the paper. Don't look at the screen. If you're going to look at the screen, help the patient direct their view as well and say, let's look at this together. Not, you don't point at the computer and think that the patient came with you. They didn't, unless you say, let's look at the screen together. Let's observe this, or let's discover this together. So now you're directing and guiding, but sometimes it's about position. It's about tone of voice. And then it comes down to what we say. So for example, the difference in, listen to the difference in, this is just a friendly reminder to tell you need to come back to have your teeth cleaned. You can say, oh, that seems to be effective, but listen to the difference in one word. This is an important reminder to tell you to come back to have your teeth cleaned. There's a big difference between just a friendly reminder and an important reminder. There's a big difference in, once again, how I say it, where my eye contact is huge. If I'm getting ready to quote a fee, especially if it's going to be a substantial fee to a patient, the most important place where my eyes should be looking is right at the patient, not at the treatment plan, not at something in writing or on a computer screen. So that's, once again, that's body language and eye contact, which are major communications. What I was
going to just come to was, on a previous episode, we had Dr. Bob Pick. I don't know if you know him.
The purple cow.
Yeah, purple cow, wow guy. Now, he has an interesting thing with the patients where he's trained his staff to do basically a disc profile on the patients before he actually gets to see, before he sees the patient. So he has a good idea or understanding of who the person is who's sat in front of them. And I find that so powerful. And I think, why don't people or dental practices use personality types, use these tools as a way of connecting with people, because we're all different.
You know, I have to say, and I'm a big fan of DISC. I'm an ID, by the way. My husband is an IC, which is, he's a dentist and he's an I, which is crazy. But I think it's important. I also think, once again, you can also, I think that another important word when you find out, of getting to know the patient a little bit. So many times when a patient calls an office, we start going into the regime of what's going to happen at the first visit. And we get all the pertinent information, you know, their name and their address, phone numbers. We might want to, you know, get some health information to determine if they have to be pre-medicated. But for me, a couple of things. First of all, I always ask permission before I start asking the patient a lot of questions. So if I'm going to launch into getting to know them, I'm going to say, so that I can help you with make your appointment, may I ask you a few questions? So once again, I'm getting you to relax and be compliant for you to say, of course. You know, I'm not going to start, what is your name? What is your address? What is your phone number? Do you have any sexually transmitted diseases? Do you have any sort of artificial parts that we need to pre-medicate? I'm not going to ask those things. I'm going to say, so that I'm sure that I'm scheduling the proper appointment for you. May I ask you a few questions? And my first most important question is this. Tell me what inspired you to call today. Not, are you in pain? Do you want to have your teeth cleaned? It's, I want you to tell me what inspired you. So something moved you to call my office today to make a change in your dental life, whether it be your aesthetics, whether it be your dental health, whether you have discomfort. Something inspired you to call, and I need to find out what that is. And my conversation will be directed to what inspired you to call. So rather than going into the, here's what we do for all new patients, or here's what we do for everyone who's in pain, I'm going to base, and I am going to mold my regime, my protocols based on what motivated you to call me.
I think it's powerful as well. And it's also a part of perhaps your consent process as well as everything else. But the key thing that people should understand is patients aren't really interested in you describing stuff to them. They're interested in when you ask them a personal question, like what inspired you, that engages them. And this is what obviously coaching teaches you as well. Right. The minute you start asking questions, the minute they realize I'm important, this person values me, they're asking me questions about my health, they really want to help me. And I think that's the key thing that people miss or forget. They think, oh, let's just go through what we need to go through and get down to business and look at everything, and they missed that important perhaps prelude to the whole show, shall we say.
Right. And I think sometimes, you know, once again, I'll listen in on conversations with a dental team member and a patient. And if I call and I say, my name is Debra Nash, and I'd like to make an appointment for a new patient, we start launching into the regulations of becoming a part of the practice. We start, and that is not going to inspire me. That is not going to make me hang up the phone and say, boy, I'm really glad I called there. So we have to, certainly we're going to let our patients know what our standards are, so that, and it's once again, we need to tell you what the standards of our practice will be, so that you are comfortable when you arrive. It's not, I need to tell you what the rules are, so I make sure you comply. We want to make sure
and the tone of your voice can really impact that. If someone talks to you in that, like, these are the rules, this is how it has to be, you're going to be like, oh, okay, if that's how it is, then that's fine. But this is why it's important to have that initial personal conversation.
Absolutely.
You know, how can I help you? How are you doing today? Yes, no problem. We can sort that out for you.
I think there's something else that's really important for doctors to know, because so many times when doctors present a treatment plan, they sit down with a patient and they start at tooth number 1. Well, you number it differently over there. So you start with the upper right side and you end at the lower left side, and you tell the patient everything you think they need. And I would say, before you launch into your treatment discussion, always ask permission for once again, and say, would you allow me to tell you what I'd like to do for you? As opposed to, I'm going to tell you what you need. I don't choose what I need. I choose what I want. We know that psychologically, but and once again, body language means I'm leaning slightly forward and I'm lowering my voice a little bit and I'm looking my patient in the eye and I am saying, would you allow me to tell you what I would like to do for you? Or would you allow me to tell you what I think is going to be in your best dental interest or your dental health? So that's the asking permission, which I think is proper. And I think it's gracious. And I think it's elegant, almost like you're passing queen. It's all of those things that I think it's when you say, would you allow me to show you what I have found and what I think is going to be in your best interest, or would you allow me to? And once I think we also want to let the patient know, we're going to give you all the information you need to help you make the right choices. And once again, that is not psychobabble. It's not psychologically trying to be manipulative, but if you help me own my treatment, so you're going to give me the information to help me make the right choices. Now I'm along with you as opposed to being told to, or being disciplined or scolded. Now
Absolutely.
I'm a part of my
power. Gives power basically to the patient. The patient feels like I'm in control. I can making the choice, but I know that you are giving me the best options, and by giving them that control, they put more trust in you in a way.
Yes.
They're like, yeah, absolutely. I want you to help me. I believe. Do you get what I mean? It's also part of the, again, consent process, and it's them sort of putting their trust in you and reaffirming that by saying, yeah, and sort of, again, it's an engaging conversation. The more you just describe and spend a long time describing the dental spiel that they perhaps sometimes don't even know what you're talking about.
I know,
the less engaged they are.
We also have a tendency, because we've heard the same questions over and over again. I've been in the industry over 40 years. So, and patients have a tendency to ask the same questions. And we have to be careful that we don't roll our eyes and say, oh, here's that question again. But I also think this is also important, and because time just races, because I love talking about this. I want also doctors to understand that sometimes patients come into a dental office hoping that you don't find anything wrong. And you do, hoping they may have been going to another dentist for years that they loved, and that dentist either retired or passed away or brought someone else in. And for some reason, I've decided to switch. But I really loved my previous dentist. And he or she didn't find anything wrong. And now I come to you and you do. And it's like, wait a minute. I've been going to this other person for 22 years, and they never told me I had periodontal disease. They never told me I needed this. And so I could be in a little bit of overwhelm, and or I could be a little bit confused. And what they will tell you is a confused mind always says no. If I'm confused, I will not make a decision. I will think about it. And I want you to think about how many times a patient leaves a practice and will say, I will call you back. I will think about it. I need to check in with my significant other. I need to check my schedule. I need to check my finances. And oftentimes what happens is the most important questions that they would like to ask you, they didn't even think about until they left you. I use an example. I had a brain tumor, meningioma in 2011, and I was diagnosed. I lost the use of my right side. That was my symptom. And I couldn't walk. And I said to my doctor, I said, I think I had a stroke. And he said, or an aneurysm or a brain tumor. Well, it turned out to be a brain tumor. And I went and had my MRI. I had my diagnostic information. I was diagnosed, and I left the radiologist, and I got in my car, and I was a deer caught in headlights. I mean, I was given information I was expecting. And then when I called my husband and told him, he started asking me questions. Is it malignant? Is it benign? Are you going to have chemotherapy? Is it radiation? What's next? What's the course of treatment? I didn't even think about asking those questions. I was overwhelmed. And I think about dental patients, and I think about sometimes we overwhelm them with maybe what they didn't expect or what they didn't know. And the questions that they would like to ask, they left with. So I think it's also important when we talk about communication. I think once again, the elegance of engaging in a relationship is that someone, and oftentimes I always say, if it can be the doctor, if it can be the dentist to call and say, Deborah, and we let them know, we preempt that, and we let the patient know, you're for the patient who didn't appoint, we say, you're probably going to have questions when you leave here. And as you're talking with your family about your experience in our practice today, they're probably going to have questions too. So as a courtesy, we will follow up your visit with a phone call. And we'll make ourselves available to answer any questions that you may have the minute you pulled away from our practice or the minute you walked out the door. So we do follow up within maybe 24 to 36, 48 hours. And now they expect us. Now it's not a call for money, it's a call for question. So, doctor, and if I'm representing you, I might say, doctor asked me to call you, as he indicated I would be, to answer any questions that you or your family members had after you left our office the other day. What questions can I answer for you? Absolutely. And that's one more connection for that patient who left, not making that appointment.
I think it's really, really important. One of the things that I personally do, especially for some patients, especially if it's complex, perhaps whether it's in a edentulous space, and they're thinking about the different options about what the best is for that, and they're looking at the reasons as to the pros and cons. It's important to understand and explain what, for example, what is a bridge, what is a denture, what is an implant, what are the different sort of treatment options, and sort of almost like perhaps write a few little bullet points so that when they can go home, they can look at that, talk to their perhaps partner, whoever, and say, look, the dentist said I've got all these options, and then make a more, I suppose, informed decision, because at that point they sometimes they don't even know what are the options, and then you've just bamboozled them with these dental words, and they're like, well, what are they? And because they're in sort of that, like you said, in that mode, it's important for them to go away and have that conversation, and then have a more deeper or meaningful conversation later on with the dentist or the doctor.
And what's going to happen, oftentimes, they're going to go home and they're going to go on YouTube. They're going to watch what you described. And that's when even some other questions may come up. So, but once again, it's about patient engagement. That I'm here for me. I'm here for you, and I will take all the time that you need to help you make the right choice. I always say to patients, I love testing my own coaching when I have the opportunity to talk to patients on the phone. And I always will say to them, whether you pay $400 for a treatment or $4,000 or $40,000 for treatment, if you're not happy, we didn't do the right job. So what's really important is for us to make sure that you feel comfortable and confident that we're going to do the right thing for you. And I think it requires the entire team to set that tone for the doctors, because most dentists, there might be a few, most dentists have a beautiful, humble personality. They don't walk in and extol their virtues. They don't walk in and extol their expertise or their bravado. Most dentists, I think, I don't think that they lack self-confidence, but I think they're very humble. They don't come in and say, I'm so glad you're here and you're lucky to be in my chair because I'm exceptional. But we can teach the team to say, may I tell you a little bit about the person for whom I work and why I work here? Because the patient not only looks to the dentist to validate that they made the right decision, they look for the team members to validate that they made the right decision in the dentist that they chose. So I think
it's almost like it's a social approval, isn't it? When
it is.
When it's so much more powerful when you say, "Oh, I'm amazing," but when somebody else says, "Oh, she's amazing," that's a whole different thing. Oh, she said, "You're amazing." Yeah. It's that kind of approval kind of thing, and it's so much more powerful rather than you telling somebody you're amazing. And I think that's the key. If you can engage your key team members to think like that and understand about ways to try and build the reputation of the business, build the reputation of the practice, and sort of enhance that by talking and using the right kind of language,
Yes.
then, you're going to get, you're definitely going to convert more patients to the treatment options.
I use the analogy of restaurants. I remember we were taking a group of dentists out, and I asked I always ask the server when I'm going into a restaurant, what's your favorite entree? What is your favorite choice on the menu? And I remember asking the server what she preferred on the menu, and she said, I don't eat here. And I said, is there a dietary restriction that prevents you from eating here? And she said, no, I just don't, the food just doesn't appeal to me. So she just basically, we all just looked at each other like, what are we doing? Yeah. And by the way, the restaurant is no longer in business. And we asked ourselves, what are we doing here? We obviously made the wrong choice. Now, I also say this, that I can't ask my team member to endorse me, the dentist, if it's not genuine. It can't be a disingenuous endorsement. I'm going to teach you how to say this, and you're going to, so repeat after me. I'm going to teach you that it needs to come from the heart. I have to feel it. So I remember working with a team member, and she loves her dentist, and she tells the team member, she tells the patients, I've been here for 25 years and this is why, and he's exceptional. And I remember a new patient turning to her and she said, he probably pays you to tell me that. And she said, he pays me to be here. But for what I've just said, he has earned that. He has earned my trust. And that is huge. When a team member says, may I tell you a little bit about my doctor or doctors? May I tell you why I am so proud to be a part of this organization or part of this practice? Because here's what I know about her. Here's what I know about him.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's so much more powerful. Plus, the patients are usually scared, and especially when you think of the dentist, and there's that kind of fear of the dentist. And I think if you've got members of staff, whether it's dental assistants, whether it's the managers, whether it's the people at reception who meet and greet, if they can make the patient as comfortable as possible, that again will really enhance that conversation that happens later on. But it's all about obviously the patient experience as well,
Yes.
And the patient's journey into the practice.
Which also translate into, I know we talked about the words not being as important, but it also translates into the written word. What are you sending the patient as whether it be a note from your practice or a welcome letter? Is it a welcome letter? Does it say you're going to be well taken care of? Or once again, is it a policy statement about what your rules are? So I always tell my clients in my offices, take a look at what you're sending to your patient. I'm just reviewing one this morning with one of my clients, and it's, the letter is very officious. It's all about what they have to do and what paperwork they have to provide. And I said, you've got to soften this. You've got to soften it to me. You are a wonderful office that really focuses on patient care, but your written word is very regulatory. So make sure that what you put in writing in the welcome letter that you sent, or the thank you, the follow-up that you send the patient, reflects the care and concern you have for them. So that's a welcome letter should be that. It should be, we strive to merit your confidence, and we're going to take good care of you. You can tell them what your rules are later. I always say that if I like you, I will be more compliant to your protocols and the standards that you have in your practice. If I don't like you, they may be an obstacle for me. But if I like you, then I'll be compliant. There's a quote, a saying, and it goes like this: if you like a person, the way they could drop a plate of food on your lap and you wouldn't mind. But if you don't like a person, the way they hold their fork will drive you insane. So the whole objective is, if my patient likes me, then they are going to be more compliant to the standards to which we adhere while we treat them. If they don't like me, they're gonna find all kinds of reasons why your standards and your protocols, your policies, if you will, don't work for them.
Absolutely.
And be less compliant.
Absolutely, and it's important to get that connection with your patients and get that relationship and get that deeper understanding, because long term, you as a practice, you'll reap the benefits, because they'll come back to you and say, yeah, I want you to do that. I want you to sort this problem out, or I want you to be in charge of my dental or oral health and things. So it's a really, really powerful toolkit. So tell us a little bit more about how you can help dentists in particular, how you can help dental practices, and what kind of things do you actually sort of really help dental practice navigate?
Well, I thank you for asking that. The reason we talked about my start and how I used to work for a major consulting firm, and I think they did a very good job. I think the reason why I decided to become solo is that I wanted to be able to customize my approach to my client. I know that large consulting organizations, when they have several consultants in the field, they have to have a more systemized, almost a manual approach, a cookbook approach to their clients, so that they can have not generic results, but they can they can have a consistent process. And I'll be frank with you, I actually designed to be the absolute opposite. I want an inconsistent process, because I want what I do with a client based on what the client needs. Sometimes the client needs coaching. I have a client where we're taking a look at her statistics and we're looking at her numbers, which is consulting. But why her numbers are askew is she needs coaching on how to present treatment. So see, we've taken this consulting relationship and turned it into a coaching relationship, that it's really not her business that's faltering. It's what she's doing that's holding it back. So I, oftentimes, I interview my clients, and I'll say, I may not be the right consultant for you. Maybe marketing isn't what you need. Maybe it's not more new patients. I like to examine, there's certain statistics that I want to review. And sometimes when I review statistics, I can say I know exactly what that practice needs based on the radical focus of their analytics. Sometimes I don't think we take a deep enough dive. That would have to be another conversation with us, but I don't think we take a deep enough dive into looking at the analytics of the practice, because it's not only how many new patients that you attract to your practice and how many new patients you keep. It's also how many people are you losing. And it's also the quality of the level of care that you're providing each one of those new patients. If I'm providing a very high level of care, and I'm providing I'm presenting comprehensive treatment plans that are being accepted frequently, then my need for more new patients is less than the practice that is not providing as comprehensive a care and not getting the patients to commit to treatment. So those are some specifics, some statistics that I like to look at. I want to look at production and collection, and I want to look at attrition. I want to look at value of patient. How are you bringing the patient back in? And although they reflect, people say, you don't want to be production oriented. Here's how I always talk about, not being money driven. And I'm married to a husband. If he could do free dentistry all day long, he would. He always says, if you do the right thing, the money will come. That's been his premise for over 40 years. And he is a fee-for-service, cosmetic-focused practice. But I always say this: how do you measure whether or not you're doing a good job for your patient? Well, if you're doing a good job, if you're doing the right thing, then they're going to return. They're going to come back. If you're doing the right thing, they're going to refer their friends. That's so if they're going to come back, is called recare or recall, returning. If you're doing the right
feedback forms and reviews are really, really powerful here as well, because the more people you can get doing them, the more you're going to improve the performance of your business and work out where things are going well and where things aren't going well.
But once again, if you're doing the right thing, so going well, you have recall. If you're doing the right thing for them, they're going to come back, they're going to refer their friends, and they're going to say yes to your treatment, and they're going to pay their bill. So I can quantify patient satisfaction and measure it, and monitor that statistically. So those are some of the things that I take a look at. And once again, I'm looking at a beautiful office she has an amazing heart. She has an incredible team, but their treatment acceptance rate is 22%. So what are we going to work on? We have to work on her confidence in how she's presenting, and she does beautiful dentistry. I mean, I'm not a dentist, but she's taken a lot of continuing education with some very esteemed teachers, instructors. She's been a lot of CE, and so I know she has her heart in the right place. It's how she presents it to the patient. So now the consulting process has become a coaching process for her in particular.
Absolutely, absolutely. So many different factors and so many things to consider, when in the practice of dentistry. Just wanted to, I was coming towards the end of this podcast, wanted to ask you a little bit about, because you mentioned that you're a speaker and you've spoken at international countries and different countries, and you mentioned about speaking, I think, upcoming in a implantology, I think you mentioned.
Oh, the American Academy of Implant Dentistry. And
yeah, so tell us about what do you, are you a motivational speaker? What do you actually talk about?
Wow, I think some people give me that wonderful credit of being a motivational speaker. Some people tell me I'm also a comedian, but I think mixed in all of that also, I think that I create very nuts and bolts, very pragmatic mechanics and that an office can employ to improve their practice. So I do talk about a lot of, I would say my strengths are certainly communication skills, how we get the patients to say yes to treatment. But I also take a look at, what are your statistics that I do analysis as well. But in terms of speaking, it's all about patient behavior. And that's probably my favorite thing to talk about is how we treat our patients well so that they want to choose your care. And that's I'm getting the team involved, team development, and getting doctors to understand the importance of presenting treatment in such a way that the patients want the treatment. And there will always be restrictions and there will always be exceptions. But once again, I think we move, you and I spoke about this before we actually hit the start button, that sometimes it's a mindset shift. You and I talked about that if I think the patient doesn't want it or the patient can't afford it, my behavior will move in that direction and it will fulfill what I believe to be true. If I think that the patient does want it and that they can afford it, and that I'm the right person to provide the care that the patient requires, then my behaviors will move in that direction, and my expectations will be fulfilled. So I can fulfill my expectations, whether they be low expectations or high expectations, in how I behave.
So we'll just finish off with a final question for you. If there's three tips that you could give the I Love Dentistry community, what would they be and why? 3
tips. Wow. All right. My first one, if I were going to do a major if this was going to be a giant consulting hour, number 1, spend more time with the patient. Spend more time. I don't believe in trying to be as quick as possible or as fast as possible. I don't know if this is a problem globally, but oftentimes in the United States, many times dental offices are how many patients can a hygienist see in a day? And they think that the more patients per day they see, that the more successful the practice will become. And I think you've got to spend more time in the new patient consultation and the new patient examination, and in recare, your patients returning.
The value of the patient decreases because you're having to see a greater number of patients, whereas if you see less and get more work from them, then they're a higher value kind of.
So spend more time. I'm thinking time is a critical factor. Also, number 2, don't forget your patients of record, the patients you've already seen. We sometimes chase new patients. And here is going to be, I think, a very important question for whether it be a dentist or a hygienist who's seen an existing patient who has an outstanding treatment plan that they have yet to complete. Maybe we diagnosed this years ago, and every time they come back in, we say, you need to do those 2 restorations. The most important question to ask that patient who has an outstanding treatment plan that continues to be pending is this. So I might say, I see that you have treatment that has been recommended that has yet to be completed. Tell me what has prevented you from having that done. That's, for me, that's absolutely review your patients of record. So many dentists have a lot of treatment already in their practices, and they don't revisit that well. Not that they don't revisit it, but they don't revisit it well with the patients. And so we have a tendency once in a while, it goes back to my time factor, to kind of brush over that. And so if we don't make it a priority, then the patient no longer senses that priority, and it becomes forgettable. So that would be number 2, is ask the right questions for your patients of record. I think number 3, and you mentioned it, is I think social media today is pretty critical. Deserve and earn your patients' reviews. It's important. People are going to read about you. I cannot tell you how many times, even in my husband's practice, when I say, how did you learn about us? I Googled you. Googled you. I reviewed. So even though you may have been referred by a friend of a friend of a friend, that friend of a friend of a friend will look at your Google reviews. They're gonna go to social media. So I think pay attention to your reputation on social media. That would be my number 3.
Absolutely, so powerful. Really enjoyed this podcast. I'd love listening to you, and I think this is definitely one of the most inspirational ones we've had, and I hope the listeners and viewers who are watching this have really benefited from this. I think it's such a powerful way of basically growing your practice, growing yourself, and basically becoming successful, and using the right markers as to what success really is, rather than what you think success is. Any lasting thoughts for this final podcast? Anything you want to share with us?
Well, I would love to come back whenever you would choose to have me. I think once again, we're now looking at the end of 2022. So my parting thought would be that as you are coming into what we call the 4th quarter of the year, this would be the time that you start setting your goals for 2023. What do you want to accomplish? This is the time. Don't wait till January. It's too late. You should be putting in motion now what it is you want to set forth to do for come January. So sometime in, we're almost at the end of September now, crazy. So sometime in October, beginning of November, it's time to sit, pause, and reflect and say, what do I want for myself? What do I want for my practice? What do I want for my patients? And share that with your team. If I always say, if you're going to ask your team to have a vested interest in the success of your practice, involve them, engage them.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for this podcast. Really inspiring, really motivational. And thanks for watching, guys. And that's the end of this episode. Really appreciate it, and enjoy the rest of, I think it's the afternoon for you, and evening for the people in the UK. But thanks, guys, for watching. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.